I want to tell you why boundaries are so important to me. For years, I have watched family and friends deal with toxic people and toxic behaviors to no end. Now, they might grumble or complain, sometimes to themselves, other times to me. And I would wonder, why tolerate something that you really cannot stand? Lack of boundaries, or at least the lack of examples on how to effectively set them, taught me that when it comes to family members, friends, colleagues, and so on, there are certain behaviors that you will just have to accept because that's who that person is. Have you heard that before? Yeah, so have I. Now, one year I had a very jarring revelation. I realized that if I did not learn how to set and reinforce healthy boundaries with other people, regardless of how well I know them and what the relationship is, three options came to mind on how I would be able to escape their harmful and dysfunctional behavior. One would be physical distance, two would be relational cutoffs, and last, very grim, literal death of one of us. It's pretty bleak, right? Yeah, I thought so too. Those options were and are still bleak to me. Futile explanations like, oh, that's just how that person is, or you know that's how they are, no longer satisfy my questions or my complaints about behaviors that hurt me, hurt others, and hurt the quality of my relationships with an individual or a group of people. So, setting boundaries and speaking up for yourself, confronting people for doing something that is harmful, has often been seen as disrespectful by older generations in certain communities and cultures. Like, take me, for example. I am African American, as you can see, and I was also raised in a Christian household. So that intersection of the Black and the Christian community, especially faith-based, church-going, speaking up for yourself, asking questions, confronting people, or trying to hold them accountable oftentimes was misinterpreted as disrespectful, talking back. There was no room for that, especially if you are confronting someone who's older than you in a position of power or authority over you, be that a parent, a teacher, a pastor, some other church leader. You could not say to them, hey, what you said, what you did to me, I was hurt by that. And I would like that you not do that to me anymore. Something as simple as that could easily be misinterpreted, mislabeled as disrespect, defiance. Spoiler alert, it is not. Now, while your delivery of your boundaries could have the potential to come across as harsh or disrespectful, like your tone, the words that you use, and your body language, boundaries in and of themselves are not disrespectful. Instead of confusing boundaries with cutoffs, so I'm canceling you, I'm never speaking to you again, boundaries actually offer an opportunity to invite people closer to you. Boundaries are saying, I want to be in relationship with you. This is how I think that we can do that in a way that is healthy for both of us. The true purpose of boundaries is to help you govern your behavior and responses. So when I set a boundary, I'm taking ownership of how I'm going to behave, how I'm going to respond, even if emotions are running high, because I cannot control anyone else except me. So boundaries are very personal. Sometimes people think that boundaries will or are supposed to manipulate the other person to behave in the way that they would prefer them to behave. No, no. That is manipulation. That is not healthy. That is problematic. And over time, you can actually push people away from you if you confuse manipulative behavior with something that is supposed to be healthy, like setting a boundary. Like, for example, I enjoy speaking with you and I love our conversations. However, I don't want to talk about why I'm in the specific field that I'm in. If, you're coming at me with, criticism, you're very cynical, hyper fixated on critiquing me, not in a way that's supposed to uplift me, but just to make me feel small, make me feel worse. Boundaries are intended to help you and me cultivate right relationships with other people, not push them away, manipulate them, or control them in a sense. That is why boundaries are so important to me, because without them, in my experience, the only way to escape toxic behavior and toxic people is through physical distance. Like when you see that auntie or that uncle that moved far away from the family, or that person who grew up and as soon as they graduated high school, they left town and never came back because they could not deal with the toxic behaviors that they were once surrounded by, be that in their home, school, community at large, what have you. Relational cutoffs. So maybe you were once good friends. Sometimes people are starting to do this even with family members. The concept of no contact. So relational cutoffs. We once were good, we no longer are. We don't speak. We have nothing between us anymore except space. And lastly, literal death of either you or the person that is perpetrating the toxic behavior. Life is very short in comparison to eternity. However, I have definitely noticed that people who they make hurtful comments, they blow past other people's boundaries, they don't consider other people's feelings. Those people, sometimes they tend to live a long life. And you might wonder, well, why is that? And I believe it's because as a believer of Jesus Christ, God is merciful and he's giving that person an opportunity to repent, ask for forgiveness, and try to live better than they did before they accepted Christ. So yeah, God is definitely merciful, and sometimes people are not. So it might feel like, okay, like the older, bitter, angry, hurtful individuals, sometimes they seem to live for a very long time. And I know in society, sometimes there's this warped mindset of, if you are a good person, if you are kind, if you do everything by the book, you follow the rules, you are respectful to authority, you're going to live a long life. Not necessarily. And the opposite, if you are not kind, if you do not do things by the book, if you are disrespectful, then you shouldn't live a long life of good quality. That's not always the case. If you ever thought to yourself the only way that you will be free from someone's toxic behavior is either you die or they die, that is a horrible way to spend your days on this earth. Because we don't know how many we have. We don't know how many that other person has. When it comes to difficult conversations and doing something you've never done before, sometimes you have to do those things afraid. You're going to have to build the muscle of having difficult conversations. Of course, you can take a cooling off period if emotions are running high and things get to be too intense. But avoiding those conversations altogether, not only are you doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing that other person a disservice. What do I mean by that? I will tell you. If you do not tell someone when they have said or done something that hurts your feelings, how will they know? If you keep silent, maybe you back off for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, but then you re-engage with them in conversation, relationship, whatever that looks like for you, depending on who that person is to you. They never learned the lesson that when they say A, it makes you feel like B. So if you're not taking ownership of your feelings in that moment, so we're not blaming, but saying, hey, when you called me that name, I was hurt by that. That really hurt my feelings. So that's not calling that person terrible. It's not attacking them. It's simply taking ownership of how that statement made you feel. Now, if you don't say that, that person has no idea. They can't connect the dots because you haven't laid it out for them. And even if you do have that conversation and that person decides to still be cruel, to still be dismissive, or whatever the offense is, you've done your part by telling them, this makes me feel hurt, dismissed. It makes me feel small. And because I don't like feeling small, feeling dismissed, and feeling hurt, I'm going to exit certain conversations if I start to feel that way with you. But if we don't say that, that person will never know. And they'll go into their other relationships and other interactions with people and do the exact same thing. Typically, what happens with those types of people, we might think, okay, well, they're just going to be isolated because no one is going to put up with them. That's not necessarily true. I'm so sorry to tell you. There are people out there who are not kind. They do not respect boundaries. They do not have the best communication or coping skills, and they are still in relationships with people, whether it is social or professional. How many times have you seen people that perhaps they weren't the kindest person, but they were the CEO of a company? Or if they weren't in a leadership position, they still had a good job that paid very well. I know I've seen that. So this idea of if you're not a kind person, life will not go well for you. That's not always the case. It'll catch up to you, absolutely. Yes, it will, because the quality of your relationships will definitely suffer. But we've all seen that person who does really good business in whatever their field is, and people tolerate them because they know at the end of the day, so and so is going to get the job done. We are going to make money, and we're all going to be able to pay our bills and have some funds left over to do the things that we want to do after we take care of our responsibilities. Don't wish death on someone just because they are toxic and they behave in toxic ways. If God could save Saul and convert him to Paul, there is hope for all of us, trust me. That is why boundaries are so important, because you can't move houses, move to a different city, or move to a different state every time you encounter a toxic person or you are on the receiving end of toxic behavior. If your go-to conflict resolution tactic is cutoffs, eventually there will be no one left to cut off. And so even though you are the person that has been hurt, you're the one that's going to be suffering in isolation because you have not held people accountable, and maybe you haven't chosen to forgive. Now, forgiving and reconciliation, they are not one and the same. You can forgive people and your relationship does not necessarily have to continue with them. And lastly, who wants to wait around for either themselves or the offender to die? I know I don't. That's horrible. That's a horrible way to live. So yeah, that's why boundaries are so important to me. But let me know your thoughts. Are boundaries important to you? If so, why? Where did you first learn about them? How do you implement them? Yeah, so that's all.